Hello and welcome to God's Minute. I'm Pastor Jonathan Conrad, and I'm the senior pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. Today, we begin a 2-week look at the book of Daniel. This week, we are looking at chapters 1 through 6, and that means we will have a special Saturday edition of God's Minute. Remember how the last Harry Potter book was split into 2 movies? That's what's done with Daniel. The book is split into 2 parts. Part 1 is chapters 1 through 6 and is more story than visions. Part 2 is chapters 7 through 12 and almost all visions. For part 1, we get to meet a cast of characters, including Daniel. But we also get his 3 friends, who I like to call the 3 Musketeers, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, what is the message of Daniel? It is a book of consolation, of comfort and solace. And the message is evil will not have the last word. And in the book, evil is in the form of kings and kingdoms, very arrogant kings. Evil is appended in the stories and foreseen in the visions, but evil doesn't go away. During all these kingdoms, the people of God live in very chaotic and violent times. Let's get to our reading for today. It comes from chapter 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his power, as well as some of the vessels of the house of God. Then the king commanded his palace master Ashpenaz to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and of the nobility, young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom, endowed with knowledge and insight, and competent to serve in the king's palace. They were to be taught the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the royal rations of food and wine. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of that time they could be stationed in the king's court. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the tribe of Judah. The palace master gave them other names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine. So he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. Now God allowed Daniel to receive favor and compassion from the palace master. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and wisdom. Daniel also had insight into all visions and dreams. In every matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. So chapter 1 starts with Babylon overwhelming Jerusalem, and the literature and the language of the literature of the Chaldeans begins to be taught. Assimilation is starting. To learn a new language and a government system in order to serve the royal administration. And that's where Daniel and his friends come in, that they can be taught this new system. Now, one major task, alter the diet and names. The new names given to Daniel and his friends are references to various Babylonian gods. Daniel uses the diet restrictions as a line in the sand when it comes to following God and following the king. Now, notice in this passage, we hear phrases like the Lord led, God allowed, God gave. You can see God's actions in a number of ways. The Lord let Jerusalem fall. Why? Well, one thing to keep in mind is the writers of the Old Testament do not linger on the why question like we would. They see God's judgment in action, and they usually assume they did something to earn God's wrath. For us, we would be stuck on the why did God let these things happen for, well, longer than we should. But here is what I want you to focus on today. Throughout this chapter and throughout the book of Daniel, God is the major actor. God is the star. Whatever happens is by, with, and through God. Even King Nebuchadnezzar, who we will call King Neb, will have to give credit to God, because it is God who lets the king win. God is actively at work in this book, and we need to remember that God is a major actor in our lives today. In fact, he is the main actor in our lives today. We are not without God. God is still working. God is still saving, and God is still reminding us who he really is. Thank you for joining me today. I will see you tomorrow for another edition of God's Minute. Take care and God bless.